Magnified be thy name, O Lord my God. Thou art he whom all things worship, and who worshipeth no one, who is the Lord of all things, and is the vassal of none, who knoweth all things, and is known of none. Thou didst wish to make thyself known unto men. Therefore thou didst, through a word of thy mouth, bring creation into being and fashion the universe. There is none other God except thee, the fashioner, the creator, the almighty, the most powerful. I implore thee, by this very word that hath shone forth above the horizon of thy will, to enable me to drink deep of the living waters, through which thou hast vivified the hearts of thy chosen ones, and quickened the souls of them that love thee, that I may at all times and under all conditions turn my face wholly towards thee. Thou art the God of power, of glory and bounty. No God is there beside thee, the supreme ruler, the all-glorious, the omniscient. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Sherry. That was beautiful. Okay, so I have an announcement to make having to do with the next two classes. Seems I have made another mistake having to do with the feast nights. I had thought that December 30th was okay because I thought that the actual feast started on the evening of the 29th, but I gather there are some sectors that are celebrating on the 30th. So we're going to have to postpone the 12th class until January 6th, which means that the discussion class that we're going to have will be on the 13th. And I'll be sending out a message about that to everybody, not just the group that's here tonight. So anyway, okay. So tonight we're going to discuss the commentary of Abdu'l-Baha on the Surah of Rum. This is actually the reason I built this course from the ground up. Everything is leading up to his commentary. And you'll see why as we go tonight and 2 weeks from now. So first of all, I want to talk about paradigm shifts. According to psychologists, by the time human beings have reached adulthood, they have experienced a number of paradigm shifts in their own perception. These psychological earthquakes can occasionally be rather dramatic, but strangely, once they have finished their work, these tempestuous transitions are sealed out of long-term memory. Let's look at an example. The following is a description of an experiment originally performed by the French psychologist Jean Piaget. The stages mentioned in it are technical terms he chose after many years of research. His theory of psychological development has since been validated by other researchers countless times, and often in non-European cultural environments. Let me just do a little screen share. Okay. And I'm going to start at the end of the alphabet tonight. I'm wondering if Nina could start us off with our first one. This is from Ken Wilber, who we'll be taking a look at in more detail in part 2.
If you take children in the preparational stage, 4 or 5 years of age, and right in front of their eyes, pour the water from a short glass into a tall glass and ask them which glass has more water, they will always say the tall glass has more, even though they saw you pour the same amount from one glass to the other. They cannot conserve volume, certain obvious things that we see. They do not and cannot see. They live in a different world space. No matter how many times you pour the same amount of water back and forth between the two glasses, they will insist the tall glass has more.
Does anybody remember being like that? Will anybody admit it? So this is their experience in the pre-operational stage. But look at what they experience a couple of years later. Linda Russell. Number 2.
If a few years later, after concrete operational awareness has emerged, normally between 6 or 7 years of age, you repeat this experiment, the kids will always say that both glasses have the same amount of water. They can hold volume in their mind and not be confused by its displacements. They have an internal rule that automatically does this, a concrete operational rule. And if you show them a videotape from the earlier period where they were saying that the tall glass has more water, they will deny it's them. They think you've doctored the videotape. They simply cannot imagine somebody being so stupid as to think the tall glass has more water.
Okay, so you can see that that transition isn't remembered. Once you arrive, you forget about what you were like before. Strange thing. So this is but one of the shifts that each of us has undergone in our youth. There have been others since then. Harold, I think, is next for number 3, if you wouldn't mind.
So they underwent a massive paradigm shift, and not a bit of it remains in awareness. The self will now reinterpret every single event of its previous life history from the perspective of the new worldview. It completely rewrites its history from within, the new and higher paradigm. Ken Wilber, Brief History of Everything, page 160.
Well, it's a little like the communists who used to paint out people from old photographs once they had been purged. Right? You forget about what happened, what those transition points were. So why have I started tonight's talk with the idea of psychological paradigm shifts? I believe a case can be made that each of the manifestations of God is responsible for initiating similar paradigm shifts in individuals and in the collective worldview of humanity. So you could look at Baha'u'llah and say that he's introduced a shift in our thinking that is leading to universal thought, seeing everybody on a level playing field. No other manifestation did that. Okay, so I want to talk about Baha'u'llah on the stages of the soul again for a minute. Before we get to Abdu'l-Baha's commentary on the Surah of Rum, there are 2 passages of Baha'u'llah's that are directly relevant to the subject of the Ark of Ascent. Baha'u'llah made an interesting statement in Gleanings concerning the stages of the human soul. Okay, Harold, I think this is number 4 for you.
Okay, reading 4. Much hath been written in the books of old concerning the various stages in the development of the soul, such as concupiscence, irascibility, inspiration, benevolence, contentment, divine good pleasure, and the like. The pen of the Most High, however, is disinclined to dwell upon them. Every soul that walketh humbly with its God in this day, and cleaveth unto him, shall find itself invested with the honor and glory of all goodly names and stations. Baha'u'llah Gleanings.
So in another tablet, Baha'u'llah expands his list to 11 stages of the soul. And I'd ask Bonnie for this one, if you wouldn't mind. That's number 5.
As to thy question regarding the soul, know thou that among the people there are numerous treatises and manifold views as to its stations. Among these are the soul of the kingdom, the soul of the dominion, the celestial soul, the divine soul, the sanctified soul, as well as the benevolent soul, the contented soul, the soul pleasing unto God, the inspired soul, the irascible soul, and the concupiscent soul. Every group hath its own pronouncements concerning the soul, and we are disinclined to dwell upon the sayings of the past. Verily, with thy Lord is the knowledge of the former and latter generations.
Thank you. Huh.
Mark,
So
Jack has his hand up.
Oh, all right. Hi. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, Mark, I just wanted to say that maybe you were going to say it, I don't know, but all of these stages of the soul that were mentioned, concupiscence, etc., this is pure Sufi psychology. All of the across these things in A.J. Arbery's book on Sufism, for example, they were very, very interested in all of these different states of mind. And as you pointed out, Baha'u'llah said, you know, I'm not interested in all this anymore. You know, they measured themselves, whether they had contentment, whether they had this, whether they had that. And Baha'u'llah just changed the whole paradigm there to say, what? I don't see the quote in front of me. That in this day, however, what is it? Anyway.
Somebody who cleaveth unto him shall find himself invested with the honor and glory of all goodly names and stations.
There you go. So he's telling us we don't have to worry too much about, you know, if we've gone through these various stages and so on. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay.
And Mark, Carolyn had her hand up, I think. Carolyn?
Oh, all right. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Hi. It's interesting because I have an old Gems from the Talmud, and a two-liner is really standing out for me now. It says, the worth of a noble soul, the soul of one good man is worth as much as all that is on earth. And that comes from Sanhedrin 103b. So I'm not quite sure where that is, but it's in the Hebrew Talmud. Probably Babylonian, I'm not sure. There are several.
Interesting. So I wonder if that's another way of saying there is no such thing as a good man.
I think the contrary. It would give proof that that good man was worth the whole of the world's richness, riches.
Okay. So in both of these quotations, Baha'u'llah is himself, quote, disinclined to dwell upon the various stages in the development of the soul. But nevertheless, he instructed Abdu'l-Baha to respond to one of his correspondent's questions on the opening of Surah 30 in the Quran. This instruction appears in his Persian tablet to Abdul Rani, written at an unspecified time in Akka. Kaze Fanana Pazir posted a partial translation of this tablet to the Tarjuman listserv in May 2000. A significant section of Abdu'l-Baha's response elaborates the stages in the development of the soul in significant detail. We will end the class and part 1 of this course with this list. So my apologies to those who attended my previous course on Abdu'l-Baha as interpreter. Tonight's talk borrows heavily from the final class of that course. Fortunately, next time's content will be new to everybody. Okay, so let's turn our attention to Abdu'l-Baha's commentary. So a few days ago, I distributed Mujan Moment's provisional translation of this commentary. The full name is Abdu'l-Baha's Commentary on the Quranic Verses Concerning the Overthrow of the Byzantines, the Stages of the Soul. So Moment presented that to the Irfan Conference in London, England in July 2000. It's a lengthy document, but we're not going to be reading all of it. You may breathe a sigh of relief. It's quite long. In his notes, Moment states that it is possible that this tablet belongs, along with A Traveler's Narrative and The Secret of Divine Civilization, among those tablets written by Abdu'l-Baha during Baha'u'llah's lifetime, and were intended primarily for a non-Baha'i audience, and in this case, a Sunni audience. So here's the brief Quranic text which Abdu'l-Baha comments upon. It's number 6, and I guess we're okay. Jennifer, I guess, is on deck here.
You have to unmute, Jennifer.
Oh,
Thanks.
sorry, thought I had.
Thanks.
Byzantines have been defeated in a land nearby, yet after being defeated, they will prevail within a few years.
Okay. So let's take a look first at the word room, which doesn't appear in this statement, but it's where this occurs. This Arabic word is obviously related to the word Rome. The name Rum actually referred to a different city during Muhammad's lifetime. It denotes the rival city to Rome established by the Christian emperor Constantine on the Bosphorus Sea. Today we know it as Constantinople. In its Quranic context, then, the name Rum is more properly translated as Byzantium, and its residents as the Byzantines, which is what was in this quotation. In his lengthy commentary on the beginning of Surah 30, Abdu'l-Baha gives 10 levels of meaning for the Arabic word Rum, along with the phrase, the Byzantines have been overthrown. 10 levels. In a few of these explanations, he also comments on the remainder of the Quranic text, in a land nearby, yet after being defeated, they will prevail within a few years. So most of it is in this first bit here. The Byzantines have been defeated. Occasionally he'll refer to the rest of that passage. So first I'd like to talk about the difference between clear and symbolic meanings in the Quran. The Quran itself informs its readers that it contains two sorts of verses, those which are clear in meaning and those about which there is doubt. So Marie, could you take a look at number 7 for us? Don't worry about the Arabic, just pass over that. Oh,
Marie, you're muted. That's good.
there she is.
Good.
He it is who has sent down the book upon thee. Therein are signs determined. They are the mother of the book and other symbols. As for those whose hearts are given to swerving, they follow that of it which is symbolic, seeking temptation and seeking its interpretation. And none know its interpretation save God, and those firmly rooted in knowledge. The Study Quran.
So the reason I'm mentioning this distinction is that the Quranic text about Rum that we just read in number 6 is generally understood to be a sign determined. In other words, clear. The Islamic commentators usually regard it as referring to a particular historical event during the life of the Prophet Muhammad. So fortunately, Momin has given us a detailed explanation of what that is. So let's see, Linda O'Neill is up on deck here.
These verses refer to certain historical events that occurred during the ministry of Muhammad. In about the year 614, the Persian king Husla Husra Parviz attacked the Byzantines in Syria and took Damascus. By 616, he had occupied Egypt and most of Asia Minor. He even besieged Constantinople for a time. News of these events reached Mecca, where Muhammad was under great pressure from his adversaries, the idolaters of Mecca. What then occurred is recounted in Islamic traditions thus. The Muslims were wanting the Byzantines, because they were people of the book, to defeat the Persians, and the unbelievers were wanting the Persians, because they were idol worshippers, to defeat the Byzantines. It is related that after the revelation of this verse, Abu Bakr even laid a bet with the unbelievers that the Persians would in turn be defeated, but he said that it would be in 5 years. When this did not occur, he questioned the Prophet about this, and Muhammad replied that the word bid means between 3 and 10. A few years later, in 622, the victory of the Byzantines occurred. Ujal Momin.
Thank you. So that means that verses 2 to 4 of Surah 30 are regarded by Islamic thinkers as verses with a firm or determined meaning. From their perspective, they see no reason to interpret it symbolically. Abdu'l-Baha's correspondent must have been rather surprised when he received a mystical commentary on this text. In this lengthy commentary, only the first of the 10 meanings he presents is exoteric, clear and mundane, I guess you'd say. Abdu'l-Baha then goes on to articulate 9 esoteric or symbolic levels of meaning hidden within this seemingly straightforward text. So we don't have time this evening to do full justice or to do justice to the full range of his symbolic interpretations of this short Quranic text. That's something you could pursue on your own if you want. As we've already explained, the outer meaning of the text in reading 8, which Linda just read. So we've already explained that. So I'd now like to briefly review the first layer of mystical interpretation, and then dwell at some length on the 9th inner meaning, in which Abdu'l-Baha elucidates the many levels of soul. That's the primary focus. So at the start of his commentary on the Surah of Rum, Abdu'l-Baha provides an endearing explanation of how he is able to perceive these hidden meanings that no one else has detected. Okay, let's see here. Is David Oak online? I didn't.
No, David's not here this evening.
Okay. Well, Jack, I guess it's up to you. This is number 9. Oop, I'll scroll it.
Got to unmute myself.
Yep.
Just a minute, folks. I'm having, okay, reading 29, Mark?
9.
9, sorry, sorry.
We're not that fast.
Yeah, the screen's a little small. I'm just going to bump it up here. Thou knowest, O my God, that this servant is the neediest of all the servants in thy realm, and is the lowliest of thy creatures in thy lands. How then, with such absolute poverty, is it possible for me to explain the incorporated and hidden meanings within the realities of thy words and the secrets which thou hast hidden from the eyes of the mystic knowers behind the tabernacle of thy word? Since, however, thou hast commanded me, I take up my pen, trusting in thee and relying upon thy bounty and mercy. For thou hast willed, O my God, that there shall flow forth from this ephemeral pen the seas of thy knowledge and the oceans of thy secrets. Thou dost not wish that the tongue of the supreme pen be silent amidst the concourse of thy creatures, nor that the outflowing bounties of the ancient beauty be cut off from the peoples. The command is thine. Thou doest as thou desirest, and thou ordaineth what thou pleaseth, and the limit thou hast set is, no God is there but thee, the powerful, the mighty, the all-bountiful. Abdu'l-Baha, The Stages of the Soul, provisional translation by Mujan Momin, Lights of Irfan, Volume 2, page 104.
Wow, what a statement this is. This is a wonderfully forthright description of Abdu'l-Baha's role as the authoritative interpreter of his father's writings. Despite his neediness and loneliness, by simply trusting in God, he is, some might say miraculously, able to articulate, quote, the seas of his knowledge and the oceans of his secrets, unquote. He attributes his ability to explain hidden meanings to the fact that God ordaineth what he pleaseth. So there's no question of his expressing his own insights. By his own admission, he is simply giving voice to the tongue of the supreme pen, which God does not wish to remain silent amidst the concourse of thy creatures. Abdu'l-Baha's absolute poverty enables the outflowing bounties of the ancient beauty to flow through his pen. This is staggering. To hear Abdu'l-Baha actually explain the inner workings of his relationship with Baha'u'llah is not something you come across very often. Abdu'l-Baha goes on to extol the limitless nature of the meanings hidden within sacred scriptures. Danielle, I think, is online. Number 10.
O distinguished and excellent questioner, know thou that from within every one of the words of God, there surge forth oceans of hidden meanings without number, and that from within every letter of the verses of thy Lord, there shine forth the suns of secrets, heavenly signs and truths that none can number except God, thy Lord and the Lord of thy fathers before you. That being the case, how is it possible for ink to flow forth with these hidden meanings, even were there to be oceans of it? And how would sheets of paper suffice, even were they to be as extensive as the horizon? There is no end to this most great gift, and no beginning to this most great mercy for it to be exhausted. Abdu'l-Baha.
So hearing him explain that there is no end to this most great gift and this most great mercy, which he confirms near the very end of this passage, one has to wonder if he isn't suggesting that those Baha'is who attain the exalted station of possessing pure hearts may one day be able to partake of this gift themselves to some extent. What do you think of that idea? I'll throw it open for a minute and see what people think. Will any future Baha'is be able to do this to some limited degree in the future, do you think? I'm overwhelmed by the silence.
No. If I may speak, or I put my hand up.
Please, go ahead.
I just understand that because of the fact that the pen is so powerful, and again, the pen continues to be an assist to all the future Baha'is, then I know that there can be no limit to what they want as their kind of fallback to increase their thirst for learning and growing in the spirit. So because of the pen, and because there's an ongoing flow, I say that the future Baha'is are in good hands. They will succeed.
Also, Mark, in the summons of the Lord of Hosts, I forget where, but it talks about in the future there will be spiritual sciences that are unknown to us now. And I take that to mean that we will really understand the intuitive realm much better. And there will be actual, the work of scientists and religious people will be more similar in the future. They will be accessing, a higher levels in ways we can't understand now. So yes, we may never get to the level of Abdu'l-Baha in that, but we'll be moving in that direction. It is hard for us to imagine this, but the whole world will be a more heavenly place then, and we'll be less distracted by lower pursuits. So I think in the future, we will be able to do some of this. We will see meanings and layers of meanings more quickly than now.
I think I'd just like to add that I think this is inevitable. And by the very nature of the universe, it's an evolutionary entity, if you will. And God wishes to have us, human beings, know him. And we understand it. To know God essentially is to know and the attributes and qualities of God. So isn't it inevitable that mankind will grow in terms of its capacity to express the divine attributes, to know them and express them?
Anyway, I'm not trying to put people on the spot, but I just think it's worth considering as a future possibility. And oh, Carolyn's got a point that she'd like to make.
In fact, I think your summary of stages of the soul's development is very interesting because there are 8 different levels in Asut for us. And if we understand the evolution that's possible, that we could go from, is it stage 4? And then it goes A, B, C, all the way up to G, sanctified soul. The perfect soul. So that it would be very interesting to study those individual stages, because we don't really know in this world below how we might put them into action. Understanding the writings is one thing, but the actions are the secondary thing that are the most important. So that would be very interesting for future study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the only place that I've ever seen these levels of the soul explained in any detail at all in the Baha'i writings.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give you a preview, this is one of the reasons I wanted to spend the second part of this course exploring the ideas of Aurobindo and Wilbur, because they go into even more detail about something that seems to be similar. We'll have to decide as a group whether we think they are similar, but they use a lot of the same language to describe some of these exalted states. So what I'm hoping we can do is eventually have a clearer picture in our own heads as to what Abdu'l-Baha is really describing for us here. Because I think many of these states would be quite enticing to people who have left Christianity, for instance. They're sick and tired of organized religion, but they're really attracted by mystical pursuits. And so these are truly mystical. I think the more we can speak about them in an educated way, the more appealing the Baha'i faith will become. Bill's going to jump through the screen. He looks like he's got to say something. But you got to unmute.
I just wanted to ask if maybe in preparation for the next part of this thing that you're doing, whether maybe you could give us a recommendation for which of Ken Wilber's books that we ought to be looking at more closely.
Yeah, I could do that. Good idea. Yeah. Okay, well, let's not dwell on that too long. So I said that I wanted to look at one symbolic meaning that Abdu'l-Baha mentions before we get to the actual ones having to do with the soul. So if you were to take a look at, what page is that? Yeah, if you were looking at Abdu'l-Baha's commentary, the Mujan Moment document that I sent you, the PDF, this appears on page 105. So in his first symbolic interpretation of this Quranic verse, Abdu'l-Baha asserts that the word Rum denotes the residents of Byzantium or Constantinople. They are people of the book, while its conquerors are the Persians, who did not possess a holy book. Okay, so let's go back to the screen sharing. Let's see here, and I think we're at number 11. Okay. Joey, how about you? 11.
The explanation
I
of
sent them a note saying I was going to disappear. So
Oh,
I'll just.
Jack, do you want to turn off your machine there?
I just muted him.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joey, start it again.
the explanation of this is that in the days when the sun of divine oneness was shining from the Mohammedan point, and the banners of guidance were raised over the notables of, let's say, Medina and Mecca, the dove was warbling upon the twigs of the Sadrat, I can't pronounce.
Sadratul Muntaha, that's, yeah. Go ahead.
Sadrat al-Muntaha, and the peacock singing in the heavenly sanctuary. The idolaters said that Khusra, the king of the Persians, who were not people of the book, had defeated and was victorious over the emperor of Byzantium, who was of the people of the book. Similarly, they said, "We will destroy the might of Muhammad, the messenger of God, on account of his being of the people of the book, as the emperor of Byzantium, and we are not people of the book, as is the king of the Persians." And so God caused these heavenly verses to descend and announce that Byzantium would defeat its enemy, the Persians, within a few years. Abdu'l-Baha.
So what he's talking about here is a war between people of the book and unbelievers, right? So the followers of Muhammad were cheering on the the people in Byzantium who were believers in Christ against the people coming from Persia who were not of one of the books. Notice the word heavenly, that it's Lahutia. That should sound familiar to you now.
Yeah.
Lahut. So that's the layer just under Hahut, remember? So we'll start to see those kinds of references, I think, as we go through this next couple of nights. In this symbolic interpretation, the verse, "The Romans have been defeated in the nearest of lands," from Quran 30, describes the declining influence of manifestation of God as his dispensation nears the end of its allotted time. And here I'm thinking specifically of Jesus's dispensation as it was displayed in Byzantium. As Abdu'l-Baha says, the King of the living, the eternal, has decreed that every affair should have a prescribed and fixed term. According to the text of the Quran itself, this decline will only last for, quote, a few years. And the word is bid. Abdu'l-Baha explains that this word actually means between 3 and 9 years, which is number 12. Okay. How about you, Sherry? Come back to you for number 12.
And a few bid means between 3 and 9. And after 7 of those years, God caused to appear that which had been announced by his most mighty companion, Muhammad. The Byzantines were victorious over the Persians, and their ascendancy was established. Thus was it confirmed to the sincere ones that the knowledge of God precedes all things and embraces all that is in existence, whether of the seen or unseen.
So the prophecy came true. It was just that people misunderstood what that word bid means. They thought it was 5 years, or Abel Becker thought it was 5 years, but it was actually a little longer than that. After this period of decline elapses, it will be followed by the breeze of the springtime of the All-Merciful. Now, in this case, we're talking about the advent of Muhammad and his breeze that he gave through. That causes the soils of capacity and receptivity to become verdant and the earth of knowledge to sprout forth. So that's one symbolic meaning that Abdu'l-Baha has covered. So there are several others that I won't touch on. But what I'm going to do is skip forward to the 9th symbolic interpretation, the last one. So I sent you 2 additional documents this week. One called The Stages of the Soul, and the other, The Summary of the Stages of the Soul's Development. The first one, The Stages of the Soul, arranges the 31 paragraphs of the final symbolic interpretation by number for easy reference. So these paragraphs can be found on pages 111 to 116 of Momon's translation. So we'll begin reading these in sequence in a few moments. They're exactly as he had translated. I haven't done anything except formatted it differently. The summary of the stages of the soul's development is a comparison of the terms given by Baha'u'llah in the passage we read a few minutes ago with the 11 and Abdu'l-Baha's levels of the soul. It indicates the paragraph number within Abdu'l-Baha's 9th symbolic interpretation, the 5 realms of God that we saw Jack's chart of last time in the Baha'i faith, as well as a brief description of each stage. That's the document you really want to cling to, I think, by the time we're finished the course. But in the meantime, this other one, The Stages of the Soul, with the 31 paragraphs is going to be very useful. We're not going to look at all 31, I think only about 20 of them, but the others are there for completeness. So from this point forward, I will be referring to the paragraph numbers in that Stages of the Soul document, the chart with the numbers. But I've copied that into the readings. So you'll see that there's a reference to paragraph such and such in that document. These numbers do not appear in Momon's provisional translation. Their only purpose is to facilitate our study and subsequent discussions. In this final esoteric interpretation, Abdu'l-Baha maintains that Rum may be understood to signify the stages of the soul and its states. The 4 pages he devotes to this subject are jam-packed with fascinating detail. Let's see if we can collectively come to some agreement as to what he is unveiling to us. So number 13. Now you'll see the way I've done the footnote here, commentary, and paragraph 1. So that's in both the Momon translation document, but it's very difficult to find because the numbers are not there. And then in the Stages of the Soul document with the numbers, this is where it comes from. Okay, so Bill, how about reading this number 13, please?
Meaning 10. And among what God has intended by these comprehensive words, the Byzantines have been defeated in a nearby land, yet after being defeated, they will prevail within a few years, are the stages of the soul and the states thereof, its degrees, its elevation and diminution, its ascent and its fall, out of the bounty of its creator, the generosity of its originator, and the power of its source. Know thou that the soul has a various stages and innumerable degrees.
That comes as news to people, I think, that there can be different stages. That's not common knowledge, I don't think. Okay, so why don't we take a quick little break to switch gears. Have a